Welcome to the Balancing Ambitions podcast. I'm your host, Kim Menapace. You are not alone in your pursuit to balance family life, work, side hustles, and taking care of yourself. Balance is not easy to achieve by any means, but we can all work to get better at it together by sharing our stories, tips, and wisdom. Let's dive into this week's episode. I'm super excited to have Jayla Siciliano joining me on the Balancing Ambitions podcast today. So Jayla and I met actually in a mastermind for Airbnbs. So she is an owner herself, manager, as well as in education, and has the Seed Money podcast, which I'd love to have her introduce more properly herself, that she's been running for a number of months now. And also she was on Shark Tank and got funded by Mark Cuban with a alcohol brand company that she ran for about a decade. So Jayla, welcome to the show. There's so much that we're going to cover today.
Yay! So happy to be here. This is fun.
All right. So where do you want to start? Do you want to, I know everyone talks about Shark Tank and loves to hear the story there. So maybe we'll begin at that part of your journey.
Sure. Yeah, it is definitely a career highlight. I don't know if I would do it again, but I'm glad I did it. Yeah, I had, like you said, I started an alcohol company. It was definitely a just naive, I'm going to go for it kind of thing. Had no idea what I was getting into. And ended up going through the fundraising process, ran into like severe production challenges, all kinds of stuff after I raised like my first round of funding. So going on Shark Tank was a little bit of a Hail Mary. And I actually did it because an advisor kept nudging me and I didn't really want to do it. And then finally I just applied and got on. It was a crazy process. The show's totally legit, though. You know, they know absolutely nothing about you to the point where the producers put fake names up on the dressing rooms so that the shark's assistants can't come around and like Google you ahead of time. So they really do keep it, where they have no idea about your company, except what you tell them when you go out there. So yeah, it was crazy. You're out there for like over an hour and they edit it down to 10 minutes and you just cross your fingers that you get a good edit. And I ended up getting the deal with Mark Cuban, which was amazing. He's like incredible, in it for the right reasons. And that kind of catapulted things, but it was kind of your classic scenario of growing too far, too fast, trying to go too far, too fast. And it's like, I love the analogy of trying to burn huge logs with not enough kindling, right? So Mark was financing inventory runs, which was great, but he doesn't do further equity investments. So we were just trying to grow too fast for the resources that we had. And alcohol is a challenging industry, very hard to be profitable. And I ended up getting super burnt out, like badly burnt out. So yeah, anyway, that's the nuts and bolts of Shark Tank, and ended up pivoting. And now here we are.
What I loved about one of your early episodes on seed money was you went into even more detail. This was a great highlight reel about
Mhm.
your Shark Tank journey. But when you say this was a Hail Mary, I still was so impressed with how much effort you put into your prep. I think you said you probably listened to thousands of hours of episodes of prior Shark Tank seasons. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing the Seed Money podcast right now. I think the reality of raising money compared to what people see, you know, on the like Silicon Valley Instagram type reels is very different. Raising money is very challenging, and I believe the most effective way to raise money is being super prepared. People, are like, oh, you can just write your business plan on a napkin and, get funding. And it's like, yeah, maybe 1% of people do that. So yeah, I woke up at 4 in the morning for months and watched every episode. I wrote down every question they asked. Um, I I was like, I am going to go out there prepared. I am not going to wing it. And it's funny, a friend of mine, I found out he was growing his business at the same time. It was a headphone company. And we met up and he's like, "Oh, I'm going on Shark Tank. I'm going in 2 weeks." And I was like, "Oh my God, congrats. Are you like prepped? Have you been practicing?" And he's like, "No, I'll be fine. I've been pitching investors." And I was like, whoa, you really might want to practice. Like, this is a different ball game. And he went out and he got like, yeah, it didn't end well. It reflected in poor preparation. So I'm a huge advocate for preparation in business and especially fundraising. Yeah, I prepped a lot for that and it paid off, I think.
I absolutely, I think so too, and I remember being so struck by that because I am someone who's overly prepared for things typically, but seeing that next level of dedication, I'm not surprised at all that you were so crisp and confident in your delivery of your pitch and that you got funded. So I think that's incredible. People should definitely go check out your episode where you discuss that in detail. Now, about seed money, I think that's also something very cool with that podcast is as someone, I'm not trying to raise money for a company or even a real estate deal. You said it also works for that. Where we come from the Airbnb space where we met initially. And I think that it's just, I love the storytelling aspect of it. And I think that that's important for pitches as well. So I love the episodes like the one about the 1620 wearables brand in Massachusetts and hearing, the drive behind it, the US made and all of that nuance and detail I think is so fun. So I found it very entertaining and enjoyable to listen to, even though I'm not trying to raise money for a particular deal or anything. All right, so for on the topic of your business that you got funded, I'd love to talk about why you initially started that brand and what lifestyle phase you were in, what was your driver in being in the alcohol business. And I know it wasn't a heavy alcohol content. I think that's a very important distinction. It was kind of in one of the first uh, beverages that you could have that was lower alcohol content.
Yeah, so I was always really active and healthy. Even in high school, I would wake up. I grew up in New Hampshire. I'd go like cross country skiing before school, and do stuff like that. And I my first job out of well, then I also, growing up in New Hampshire, had a wild side, and the second I graduated high school was like party. And so for my 20s, like late teens to early 20s, I was definitely going after it from a party standpoint. And it was a lot of fun. I worked at Diesel Footwear and huge party environment, traveled to Asia a lot, heavy, heavy drinking environment. And then I went to Burton Snowboards and that kind of continued there. And it was like I was probably like 26, so not even that old, but I was like, oh my God, I cannot do this. Like my body cannot drink alcohol and still be active and healthy. I was able to kind of do that thing for, a handful of years, and then it started to be like, this is not good. And but there's this, and I think the whole shift in alcohol has just been incredible. It's so much more acceptable now to not drink at all, which is amazing. And I think it's great. But in the like early 2000s, mid 2000s, that was not the case. It was still very much a like pressure to drink at work outings and stuff like that. So I started making wine spritzers. I would just order a glass of wine, order soda water, and mix them because I could sip on that and I like couldn't do hard alcohol anymore. I'm not a beer drinker. I'd get full and bloated. And then one summer, I was out wakeboarding with all my guy friends, and they start asking me for wine spritzers. And I'm like, okay, guys don't want to be full and bloated either. And they don't want to be necessarily like, drunk at 3 in the afternoon anymore. So I was like, there is something to this. You had the wine cooler category of the 80s that's all malt liquor and sugar, and you have the light beer category, but there's nothing, and wine is high alcohol. There's nothing like in between. So I was definitely ahead of, the curve. Like so I decided to just go for it and create this brand. And it was interesting. When I first started pitching investors, they were like, nobody is going to pay for less alcohol. This is ridiculous. So buyers at the grocery stores, distributors were just set in that old, mindset. And now it's a, like 11 plus billion-dollar category. Right when I pivoted out of it is the year that White Claw started, and they are really the ones that created awareness around a lighter, healthier, low alcohol option. And so, there's a lot of factors in business. There's timing, All those things are very real and can impact business. And I have no regrets at all, but I was definitely ahead of the curve in the light alcohol space. Had I launched it probably 5 or 6 years later, it would have been a much easier process because it's very expensive to educate a whole consumer group about a category as well as an industry, like educating the distributors and everybody. So yeah, it was an uphill battle, but I learned a lot.
Oh man, there's so much I want to unpack here. So there's three things that jump out to me that I when I hear that. One was that the 2000s were when bottled water exploded and having different brands in Fiji water and Spark water. I was just at the airport and saw all these brands. And it's funny, I think people probably said that about bottled water at the time because there was water fountains everywhere. I remember even my economics professor in college saying this was ridiculous that people bought bottled water because he was this 80-year-old man. He wasn't quite 80, but he was definitely much older, and he said there's fountains everywhere and just bring a cup to it. He could not understand it yet. It's a probably multi-billion-dollar industry as well, so that's interesting, where people pay for something with 0 calories, never mind
Yeah.
lower alcohol content, so that they can still have that socialization. And even consumerism, you want to have 2 drinks or three, but have it equate to one for some reason. That's just the kind of the world we're in right now.
Mhm.
Two was that I was just in Orlando last week. We were just catching up offline about that trip, and it was very interesting with this group and just in general. There's a shift towards not drinking at all or drinking less. And so when we were in Universal Studios and going to restaurants, we were asking them, "Hey, do you have any non-alcoholic beer?" And most places had it, and the one that didn't, this chocolate factory with these crazy milkshakes and tons of desserts piled on top of the milkshake, they said, "Hey, we are contemplating which one we're going to source, but we might not have it in stock yet, but we're having a lot more people request it, so we might have it in stock." And they checked and they hadn't yet, but every other place did. So I think that this is going to be an interesting trend to keep a pulse on over the next 10 years, because I do think that there's going to be more and more people that are going to go to zero alcohol content, or lower alcohol content is already here, or lower calories and lower alcohol content. And even for me personally, we did a trip with the same group back in October, and it was in November. It was up in New Hampshire at the state capitol, and I'd have a glass of wine. I wouldn't sleep as well that night, so then I'd have extra coffee the next day thinking that would
Mhm.
help, and I had this vicious cycle of being tired and jittery at the same time. So this trip, I had one glass of wine on the last night at the Italian restaurant and tons of water and felt fine, and I came back so much more refreshed than normal life, or than that October trip where I came back even more depleted than when I had left from a break from the kids for a couple days and daily life and regular work and stuff. So it's just interesting observing your own personal energy. And then I'm just very curious to see how this trend develops more macro.
Yep. No, I agree. I think once you once you get used to it, it's a little bit of a shift, a mental shift to go to not drink as much if you're used to drinking more regularly. But then like I feel like once you do, it's no big deal at all. Like this thing that at one point I remember thinking, that'd be so weird to not drink. Like, what would I do? And now it's like, I have a glass of wine maybe once, twice a month. I just don't want it. And I think too, when you're enjoying what you're doing in your life and you have all these things you're motivated towards, it's just so low on the priority list. You know, you just don't need it. You're fulfilled other ways. So and there's plenty of people who are fulfilled and their bodies can just handle it differently, right? My body literally does not process alcohol. I don't metabolize it. So there's all different body types and, motivations for it. So whatever anyone's choice is totally fine. But I think, yeah, for people who do want to drink a little bit less, it is just a little bit of a shift. And then it's not a big deal at all for me anyway.
Yeah, and it's like you said, everybody's different. I also have more data, like the Aura Ring, that I'm using as input into that, not just how I feel reflecting in my reflection and my energy. And it's funny, Dave, my husband, will have a glass of wine and get more deep sleep than he normally does, but his
Oh,
readiness score and heart rate variability and stuff will be worse. And whereas mine, one glass of wine, I can see it in all my scores. And I think also when you think about lifestyle wise, you're a very active person too. You're a mom as well. For example, I'm going out to dinner Friday night and my friend's going to yoga at 8 a.m. on Saturday. And I know it's going to be a lot harder to get up for yoga class if I don't sleep well or have two glasses of wine or anything. So when you think more macro of your holistic schedule and lifestyle and your values, it just helps make that decision for you a bit more when you have a lot more experience and data around how your body reacts to that stuff and how it's felt in the past, what didn't feel good and what feels good, especially us being in our 30s and beyond, wanting to have the energy we can, the best energy we can for ourselves and for our kids.
Yep, totally agree.
Yeah.
Kids
All right. So
factor in there big time.
yeah, so let's pivot. So you have an 8-year-old son, and I connecting the dots a bit for listeners. I'd love for you to speak to this yourself. I think that was a big part of wanting to start a family, and that the crazy schedule that you were doing when you were at Bonafere, your alcohol brand company, was just not something you could foresee having a family with, and that not jiving with how your lifestyle was at that time. Do you want to talk about that a bit more?
Yeah, and it's funny, this literally just came up. I think it was last night my husband and I were talking about it. Because I have a friend who's trying to process closing down a company and is having a really hard time like processing that because it's like it's almost like grief to some extent, right? You go through all those stages. So yeah, I think another shift culturally is that, in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, it was very, very heavy hustle culture, especially in the startup space. Like, kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself. Mark Cuban has a saying, he'd hire people that are 24 years old, work them 24 hours a day, and pay them $24,000 a year. And that's like how they basically just would earn their like grit to make it happen. I don't know if he still does that. That was a while ago, but it's just case in point of like that was the expectation if you had a startup, right? So, I mean, I was killing myself. I was literally working 16-hour days. I was traveling constantly. I would travel for investor meetings, distributor meetings, events, all over the country. It was crazy. It was a lot. I missed friends' birthdays, weddings, baby showers, my own wedding. I was signing investor docs like the night before. I picked out my wedding dress and I think I brought two with me to Mexico and figured out which one I was wearing the morning of. Like it was like really work was the priority, right? And my husband was super supportive, but at a certain point that really can wear on a relationship, right? And I started to sense like he would just be like, okay, yeah, you're not going to this like dinner with me again, or you're bailing out of this last minute, you're bailing out of that last minute. And I just sensed that that wasn't fair to him, even though he was super supportive. And then we realized, okay, we've put off having kids for this business, and I'm 39 years old. It's kind of like if we're going to do this, we need to make a decision and do it. And so I ended up getting pregnant, and my mom was home every day when I got home. Fresh bread and cookies, and she literally was like always there. It was so exciting if I got off the bus and her car wasn't there. Just to be home alone for like 30 minutes was so exciting. So all I thought was like, oh my God, I don't want to be that mom that is like gone all the time. That is not what I want to be. So, and I was like, I am taking my marriage for granted, like up to a bit. This isn't going to be sustainable. And I love him to death. I don't want anything to happen. I don't want to cause that. So, yeah, that was kind of the driver behind it. I was like, I just can't keep this up. And I talked to all my investors, and they were just like, it's not for lack of effort. This is a brutal industry. You're trying to carve out a new category. Like, it's just, blah, 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 lack of resources. I went out to raise more money, and I was pregnant, sick as a dog. It was a red flag that Mark Cuban, a billionaire, was on my board and he wasn't doing a bigger equity investment. So I could have done it had I just pushed and pushed and pushed. But I decided not to. I decided to prioritize. Oh, and I had high blood pressure, like there was a lot going on there. And I was like, my great grandmother had a heart attack when she was 46 and died. And I was like, oh my God, I legitimately have heart issues in my family. This is so dumb. I knew other another female entrepreneur who had a heart attack in her 40s and died. So I was like, this is very real. Like, I can't keep pushing myself like this. So I made the decision to basically wind it down and walk away. And it was the hardest decision I've ever made. And, but then I was like, I could look at this as like closing down the company or opening up a whole new life, right? And that's how I chose to look at it. And it was like, I'm not, I'm saying no to this thing, but I'm saying yes to all this other stuff. That's way more important. Like at the end of my life, what's important? Growing this alcohol brand or having a family. So everybody has different priorities. That was my priority. Um, I think, could I have done both is a really interesting question. I truly don't believe I could have. Now, I think there are sacrifices when you are building a company and a big company. Growing, if you're not growing, and we know this like right now, my current company, when I'm growing, I get busier. When I just like get into stabilize all the systems, it is very much on autopilot and it frees up a ton of my time. And I've learned to balance like growth with, that time, the need for time. But it's taken me a long time to learn how to do that. And I still have to remind myself constantly to do that because I love the growing part, but I have to pump the brakes. So personally, I don't think I could have done that without sacrificing my relationships to some degree. Um, I'm home every single day. I pick my son up from school. I take him to school. I go to every single game. I coach his teams. Very involved. He's never had a babysitter. My husband's got a super flexible schedule also. We took 5 weeks off last summer. We went to Italy for 3 weeks and road tripped. Like these are things I don't think I could have done if I was trying to grow a big alcohol brand to get a big investor, payout. So I have no regrets, but it took me a long time to get to that point. And most of it, honestly, is such stupid shit. It's basically like what other people think of me, right? Like, oh, people like think I failed. People think this. But once you can really shut that out, it's like, who cares? I don't care. Nobody else should care. And if they do care, that's their problem. But it is hard to get to that point. It's like easier said than done. So yeah, that I don't know. I don't think I could have done it. And had the same quality of relationships and lifestyle that I have right now.
Yeah. I'm kind of speechless. I was going to also ask you what your lifestyle looks like right now, and you answered that. And there's even details in there I didn't even know about, like the heart attack scares and knowing people in your life, both present day and in your family history, who had that, and that being a real motivator and wake up call for this drastic shift. And like you said, saying yes to something instead of, and saying yes to those new opportunities and that new life that you were unlocking and not looking at it as a failure or something people are going to point to and say, oh, look at she didn't make it work or something. My mentor says that the fear of criticism he thinks is the biggest fear that plagues the society and most people. He used to think it was fear of poverty, but he realizes
Mm.
it's probably more fear of criticism. And I know I
Wow.
suffer from it as well and have done a lot of work in that area, but you'd like to say it goes away, but it doesn't. You just upskill a bit so you can cope with it better and be a little bit more resilient to it, but it's still always there in the back of your head.
Yeah, definitely hard to eliminate completely. And a lot of times we're our own worst critic, right? It's like our own, we have to let go of our own judgments too, which is like, hey, that's okay. Try something else. Like it doesn't mean, not judge myself on that thing that happened or whatever.
We are our own worst critics. I 1,000% agree. So, what does balance look like to you today? And I know you touched on this one, but yeah, anything else you'd like to add to that topic?
Yeah, I think balance today is being able to do the things that like make me happy and I love to do. I love traveling. We're planning, I think I just mentioned to you, a trip to Belize. We're going back to Vermont this summer for 3 weeks. That to me, before I started Bonafire, I had a rule that I had to go to a new country every year. I traveled a ton in college and, right after college and stuff. And And I'm back to that rule now. So now I'm like, I got to do that. That's just something I really love doing. I go for an hour walk every single day. Maybe, well, yeah, every once in a while it gets skipped, but that is like my Zen time. I just love that. I live in Santa Barbara. It's beautiful year round. And for me, what has become important is I love to work, but I want to work when I want to work. I don't want to work when someone else is telling me to work. I want control over my schedule and I want my work to revolve around my lifestyle schedule. So, if I have, like my son's jogathon just got switched 3 times and I can rearrange my schedule and make sure I'm there for it. I don't have things where I can't change that. I can't change that. Like pretty much anything on my schedule, I can change and rearrange if I need to. So where I think that's different when you're working for someone else, you can't always do that. You can, but maybe the consequences are a lot, bigger. So yeah, I think balance. My husband and I, our relationship is considering, I think we're going on 13 years and it's really good. We spend time together. We love spending time together. We're both entrepreneurial, so we have a lot of fun like building and creating business type stuff, but it's not like dominating our conversations or our life or anything. So it's taken a while to get here. And I think even in the past couple of years when I started this new business, I got caught up in that like growing too fast. We've talked about that a lot. And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing the same thing again. What am I doing? So I feel like I finally have, and it's hard too. When you start a new business, you don't know what you don't know and you're figuring things out. And that's part of the fun. But, you also have to catch yourself and when it's crossing over into what your priorities are and making sure you're kind of, it's like a constant keeping yourself in check, I think. So anyway, yeah, I think that's balance. I always, eat healthy. I will say, I think this is something you and I also talk about quite a bit. I've gotten a lot better at delegating. I don't do things that I don't need to do. I finally have someone managing my email, my calendar. I hardly ever go grocery shopping, unless I want to, right? Like sometimes I like just going to the store and poking around, but I don't want to deal with it if I don't feel like it. I'd rather exercise. I've got someone helping me book camps for Barrick. That's a pain in the ass. I don't want to deal with that. I do love planning vacation. That's fun. So I like actually researching trips and doing that kind of stuff. So I think it really comes down to doing the stuff you love and trying to get the stuff you don't love off your plate, which again, doesn't happen overnight, but I think setting that goal, it's very attainable if you just kind of chip away to get there.
You reminded me of that connective piece between your winding down your company and then your current company. And so you did have a traditional W-2 job as a
Yes.
leader, I think it was a marketing leader at a company, and you didn't love that. You found, I think it added some stability, I think, from the crazy roller coaster you were on for 10 years or so. And then you started this Airbnb management company, which is where we were able to meet because we were placed randomly in a pod together. And I just connected with you right away. And I also knew, yes, how quickly you grew. I think it was 7 months, you had over 20 luxury properties. And what I mean by luxury is some people have 2 to 3 properties that gross the same amount as one of yours. And I don't think I'm
Mhm.
exaggerating there, where we even have a cute little beach cottage, but it grosses in revenue a fraction of what these bigger homes can make in certain markets. And so yeah, you did hit the gas pedal, and it sounds like you're able to course correct and reflect and realize, oh man, I'm doing it again, or I don't have that freedom and flexibility I had a few months ago, or that I had crafted my life to be, so that I can be around for my husband and my 8-year-old son. And he's been on some really cool trips. I remember even you guys in California going up to Mammoth Mountain, and he's snowboarding, or he's snowboarding in Vermont. And like you said, the Italy trip last year, it's really cool. He's at an awesome age where you can really leaning into those experiences where my kids are a little bit younger. So I'm a little more scared to do these
Mhm.
trips. Even my kids haven't even been on a plane ride together. I think we're going to do that this year finally with Disney World, but that's very cool. I forgot that's a cool missing piece that people might want to key in on is there was that connective tissue between your two entrepreneurial journeys, but I think it's in your blood. You just are naturally, wired to do really well and thrive being your own entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's funny. So when, no, I'm glad you brought that up because when basically my son was born, I took a year off and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I have no idea what I'm good at. Like I've been doing wearing all these hats. My confidence was like literally in the gutter. I was just like, I don't know what I'm good at. I have no idea. Like it's crazy. And I have other friends who've gone through the same thing. It is such a gnarly hit to your confidence. Now, I think some people, I don't know if it's a little dose of narcissism, it doesn't bother them. But if you don't have that, it can be very challenging to overcome that, like not take it, as a hit to your confidence. When really you should just be going, look what I created. Oh my goodness, it's amazing. So right out of the gate when it first happened, and of course, I had a newborn, life is crazy anyway. But I was like, I just need a job. I don't care. I don't ever want to start another business. But if I did ever start another business, it would be a service-based business. I was like, I'm never going to do a consumer product again. And now I even say never, but that's where I was at then. So I went and got a job I was like, I want to work for a small company where I can make an impact. So it was, a local company, very cool company in the music industry, was there for 5 years and was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I don't want to work for someone else. So once I got through the toddler stage, I was like, okay, I've got the energy again. Yeah, I overcorrected and went too far the other way. But it was actually really good. I believe the reason I got that job, I think everything happens for a reason. The CEO that I reported to, this woman, we still text every single day. We're so close. She was such a mentor to me and gave me that confidence back. So I think everything happens for a reason. And so yeah, anyway, it was a crazy, overcorrection, but I think some really good stuff came out of it and then led me into this Airbnb, business, which has been great because it balances both the lifestyle and the financial goals.
I love that. And I've met your former CEO, and she's an incredible lady. So that is a really cool blessing that came out of that stint back in the W-2 corporate world there. It's interesting. I want to go back to the point you made about how you felt your confidence was really low. And I was just listening to a video on YouTube with this doctor in child psychology, and he talked about how self-esteem is built from skill mastery. And so, and he was talking about kids doing soccer and sports and stuff as an example. And so it's interesting because you acquired countless skills in that tenure with your company, but maybe the skills finally being idle can totally knock your confidence. Like you said, instead of looking at it as a success of I built this thing, you're feeling depleted and low on your confidence. So it's just interesting. I was just connecting those dots where I felt that way before too when I've been at a job I wasn't fulfilled in or not as good of an environment and my confidence was so low. It's probably the one of the only times I've been pretty depressed in my life, and I'm a pretty happy and positive person. But I think again that could be that you don't recognize that you have that skill mastery, or you're not utilizing it, so you don't get to have that feedback loop to help boost that confidence too.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point. It's funny. So my son's got this like fundraiser jogathon happening, and I'm always thinking, how do we build confidence in our kids and, teach them goal setting and stuff like that. And he wanted to earn a certain amount of money for the fundraiser. And we donate to it, obviously, but I'm like, you got to work for it. So he spent the whole day doing a popcorn and lemonade stand. and he earned $131 and he just couldn't believe it. The next day, he's like, I just can't believe I hit my goal. And the level of confidence was crazy to see. So I wonder if there is something there where I had this goal for so long, for 10 years that I was working towards. And the fact that I didn't hit that one goal crushed my confidence, right? Even though I'd built up I did hit a lot of goals along the way and there were a lot of wins, like tons of wins, right? I mean, there's a lot of people who go to launch a product and don't even get it on the shelf, never raise the money. There's a lot of wins. But yeah, I wonder if there is something to that, and that maybe that's a lesson to not hang your hat on one single goal, because that entire confidence to it. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point.
Now that
Anyway.
you brought up those goals you hit along the way, can you share the sticky notes? Because I remember you had two distinct ones on your computer that you looked at every day, and you did accomplish those.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem. I didn't set new goals. Yeah. So I had, when I went out to raise money, I realized, okay, I'm going to need outside funding. And I had two sticky notes on my computer. One said get into Whole Foods, and the other one said raise $1 million. And I did those two things. But then I got so busy and crazy and scattered that I didn't really focus. I had new goals, but I wasn't focused on them, laser focused. Like I was on those two every single day. Every action I took was driving towards those two sticky notes. So I think if I had taken the time, like hit the pause button for a minute and created my new sticky note, or two or whatever it was, and been laser focused on that. And if the goal had aligned with my lifestyle, like maybe if I had said, I need to build this company in a way that's sustainable with a family, what I would have done, I honestly, I don't know if I could have done it because my head was so all over the place. I was so busy. But looking back, I would have just made it a direct to consumer brand online. I had a wine club, I had the online business running, but I was chasing down resorts in Vegas and poolside containers we were creating. And I mean, ridiculous how many directions we were going, right? And so if I had aligned my goal with my lifestyle goals and made that the laser focus, then yeah, I probably would have gotten a lot closer to hitting that, but I didn't do that. So what happened is my goal became my investor's goal. And that's one of the reasons why I do seed money now, because I think it is so important in that early stage to be really clear on what your lifestyle goals are, as well as your funding goals, and make sure your investors know what that is upfront and find the right investors versus investors whose expectation are, grow it and sell it for 100 million is a very different goal than grow a sustainable brand online that I can, you know, not travel constantly and have flexibility to be present with my family. Two very different goals. So yeah, anyway, yeah, the sticky notes were an interesting win, but I just didn't follow through and set up the next one.
It's a profound insight. I really like where you just landed with this. And I have one follow-up question for you, and then we can wrap up because I want to be respectful of your time. When you're in this busy, busy season of your life, 7 days a week, 16-hour days, were you going to conferences? Were you networking with non-alcohol brand investor people, people that are just like-minded, growing totally different businesses that you can learn from? Were you in masterminds? I know that's where we've met. And I think that I've learned how to be more efficient and look for things around the corner before they're on my radar, especially you. I learned so much from you as we were in the phase of three properties getting to eight and then eight to the next. I would ask you questions, you'd be able to answer them, and something that would took 10 seconds of interaction helped save us a headache of not setting up contracts properly and making sure we do X, Y, and Z off the get-go with new clients we were doing. So yeah, I'm curious. Tend to find correlation. So I'm curious, yeah, what were you doing in that space, if anything? Because I know that's a big part of our lifestyles now. And we even met in Vegas for one of the Ryan Pineda conferences.
Yeah. Um, I was not doing like masterminds like I do now. I didn't really know about masterminds. Now, what I will say is I was getting my MBA. I got my MBA at USD in person. It wasn't an online MBA. So I was networking like crazy, obviously, through my MBA program. I did meet, I was on a panel, an entrepreneurship panel, and I met four women, and we did dinner like once a month, and they were all entrepreneurs. And I've stayed really good friends with a couple of them. Um, and then I was part of like accelerator groups, and then I was mentoring for, accelerators. So I definitely did a ton of networking. But I think the MBA, that cost me $150,000. I could have done. So now I'm a huge proponent of masterminds because I think you get that same networking capability and the knowledge base without having to go and do the formal, you know, education program, which a lot of it is theory. I mean, I definitely think it was great, but I don't know. The high majority of it is not tactical information. So, um, yeah, so I wasn't doing masterminds like I'm participating in now, but I did do a lot of networking. It was just kind of a different style of it. But yeah, it was super important. I don't think I could have done all that if I wasn't networking. One super quick funny story. I don't know if I've ever told you this. So when I went to school, when I started the MBA program, I was like, I need to raise money. Part of the reason I'm doing this is to make connections. I'm going to go to every single event I possibly can, just because you never know what's going to come out of it. So the first one was like, "Hey, we need a photo for the brochure," and they asked the new MBA students to come in and do photos. So I went in, and I had never worn like any kind of business clothes in my life. I worked at Burton, worked at Diesel, like never put on any kind of a suit. I felt so weird. I felt like I was like a mom dressing up, plain dress up. But I was like, oh, I guess, I'm in my MBA. I better get like something a little more like professional looking. So I got this, more professional looking outfit. Totally didn't feel like myself. Went to this thing, said hi to everybody. And they're like, oh, could you just stand over here up against this white pillar? And they got a photo. And next thing I know, that damn photo of me in that awkward outfit shows up on a billboard on the like 10-lane highway. And it was up on a billboard for 2 years. I had to drive by that billboard every day on my way to class in my business like bodysuit. I was laughing so hard. So anyway, it was really funny. So, uh,
2 years. That's a long
yeah,
time. Oh, it's
it's
so
funny.
That's amazing. At least you can laugh about it. If you hate it, it sounds like you weren't a fan of it because it felt not like you, but it sounds like I'm a big fan of laughing at yourself. I'm the first one that'll laugh at myself for that stuff. But it's funny how that stuff can happen. That happened to Dave, where we were filming a Car Gurus commercial and photos for our website years and years ago. And they needed more males, 28 to 35. And I volunteered Dave because he had bought his car through Car Gurus. And they gave him a $300 Amazon gift card. He showed up on our homepage of our website. He showed up on our annual report for investors, and they used clips in a national ad for him
Oh my
through
God.
car gurus
That's
and our
awesome.
dogs, because the storyline was we had a small car and we needed a bigger car because we had Great Danes, and it was so funny. People would take a photo at a bar with him on the screen in between a football game, and they're like, "How much money did you get from this?" He's like, "An Amazon gift card."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh my God, that's funny. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So you just never know. And that's interesting. And they probably proposition it that way so that people aren't intimidated or won't say no and stuff. And then if you wrote the rights off, they can use it for whatever they
Yeah.
want.
Yeah. Had no idea.
That's hilarious. Wow, that's a long time. Billboards are an interesting marketing tactic. I don't understand them fully, but that's a long time for that
Yeah.
ad.
Yeah, it was funny.
All right. Well, we will
Uh,
wrap this up. So to close, Jayla, where can people find more about you and about Seed Money, the podcast we've referenced a couple times?
Yeah, so love doing the podcast. It is so much fun. Seedmoneypodcast.com, or just search Seed Money in any of the podcasts platforms and it should pop up. And it's on YouTube also if you search Seed Money and Jayla, Jayla, if it doesn't come up. But yeah, would love to have people check it out. It's super fun. I love doing it.
Awesome. Thank you so, so much for joining us today, and everyone have a beautiful day. As always, if you enjoyed this show, please leave a review, because when you leave a review or share an episode, you make it easier for someone else to find us and benefit from these stories and tips we share. There is a link to everything we talked about in the show notes. Thank you all for listening to the Balancing Ambitions podcast, and have a beautiful day.